Hi everyone. So I'm just going to try and walk you through the application. Uh, Generally, people should have started by now, but it's not too late. The general deadline for applications is October 15th. So we're just going to go through the different processes of the application and what you need to do in terms of just the basic bare minimum of applying. In terms of getting your application competitive for Oxbridge, we're going to deal with the next section. Usman, can you move it to the next slide, please? So generally, you'll see that with the UCAS application, so UCAS is the University and College Admission Services. So you want to have, the first thing that you want to do is pick a course. So if you're in A2 right now and you're looking to apply next month, then by this time you need to decide, okay, what course do I want to do? Generally, Oxford and Cambridge will offer you traditional courses, whereas in comparison to US universities, you can always go there and decide what you want to do. So here you'll have to pick, okay, so if I'm doing biology, do I do biology or do I do physiological sciences or do I do biochemistry? If you're into maths, do I do maths? Do I do physics? Do I do computer science? Do I do engineering? And once you pick those courses, because most degrees are 3 or 4 years, you want to be really sure what course you want. The next thing is picking, sorry, go back. So the next thing is you want to pick your college, because not every college offers the course that you want. And then you need to start preparing your first draft of your personal statement and organize your academic references. Oxford and Cambridge, as opposed to Ivy Leagues, are more concentrated on your academics, so they really count for it. The next step is to look for the tests. So if you can move to the next page. So there's a number of tests that you have to write depending on the course that you're applying for. Not every course has a test, but there most of them, like major ones that people do take, they are tests. And so most of the deadlines for them are 15th October to sign up, with the exception, I know that there's a lot of people interested in law school, and with the exception of law, where the deadline is 15th September that you have to sign up for it. So you sign up by 15th September and you write the test by 15 October. So that's not here at the moment because that's offered by a different service. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, that it is now 6th September, that you only have 9 more days to register for that course. So these tests are different depending on what you want. So for example, the math test would be similar to the SAT, if you like. And that's required for Oxford degrees for mathematics, computer science. Whereas if you're taking the classics test, that's more like a Latin translation test, a Greek translation test, and a classics language aptitude test. And though you're writing them deadline by 15 October and you're writing them by the first week of November, if you're writing it this year, you need to be starting if you haven't started so far. Next page. The next is written work. So written work is really important, especially for the humanities, where they want you to write an essay. So these essays are graded similar to how Oxford and Cambridge students write these essays in first year. And what they want to see is, how do you approach a certain problem, a certain statement? How do you argue? What's the depth of your research? How interested are you in that topic? So whatever written work you're sending, it's a reflection of you and how you think, how passionately you think about that topic, how much you're engaged with it. And these written works, though they don't have like a specific requirement of how long they should be, usually you'd say 2 to 2 pages, a couple of pages at least. But this would vary depending on what the course is. For example, classics has 2 pieces, whether you're writing an essay or commentary on a piece. History has 1 essay that you have to write. So these all vary. But the deadline is past the UCAS application. So you can get to the UCAS application, which is due on 15th October, and then get started on it. Ideally, you should have already started on it, but that's where you want to be. People who are applying next year or the year after should keep this in mind, that your summer before the application is dedicated towards your personal statements, trying to get feedback for your written work, and preparing for your admission test. Next, please. Yeah, so once you have your UCAS application by 15th October, you start working on your written work, and then you get shortlisted for your interviews. So the interviews usually happen between the first 3 weeks of go back for a second. Back, yeah. So interviews will usually take place in the first 3 weeks of December, and then you have your final decision in January. So the way interviews would happen is that you go in for a weekend, and then we'll talk about it in detail about it later. Next slide. So the personal statement. So as opposed to the, again, like talking about the comparison between US schools and how we've been more focused about US schools, and even in Pakistan now, Oxford and Cambridge really value your academic potential. They want to see in your personal statement why you picked that subject. So for example, if I were to do biochemistry, what really excites me about biochemistry? And you have to go above and beyond just what you're learning in A-levels. So for example, if somebody's doing biology in A-levels and doing Krebs cycle, then they have to say, oh, I read this research in this journal article and that fascinated me, or I'm more curious about this, or how this plays a role in cancer biology or cardiovascular disease. If somebody's doing math, then you pick up a certain theorem and say, okay, this is something that excites me and this is what I want to work on. If, for example, in the case of Yannick, if he has to go for English, then you pick up something old, like for example, Shakespeare, and say, why do you really like studying that, right? And what really fascinates you? So you really need to cater your personal statement towards highlighting your academic potential. Why do you want to pick that course? Why would you be the best candidate for that course? You could say, okay, I read all the time, and like this is something I've been reading for the past 4 or 5 years. And so you really want to highlight how each and everything that you do within school and outside school makes you the best candidate for that specific program. It's sometimes easier for the sciences student because you can say, I was in engineering club, I made this program, or I made this robot and stuff. For the humanities, it comes down to how much you're reading, how many essays, competitions, and all those things that you've been involved in. And again, it's just like, how do you connect it back to your subject and stuff? You have some personal anecdotes as well in terms of your extracurriculars, but mainly you're judged on how your academic excellence is. Next, please. So in terms of interview, so as I mentioned before as well, usually interview is scheduled around the interview weekend. So you go in, you live in the dorms or like the colleges for the specific college you've applied to. And even though they say that usually you have just the interview time, so interviews would vary depending on the course that you're taking. So there might be 1 interview, or there might be 5 interviews in some cases. Especially in the humanities, it's notorious for multiple interviews. But you go in and there'll be a chaperone with you, a student, and they'll show you around, they'll take you for lunch and dinner, and they'll show you your room. At night, there'll be sessions to mingle with them. At every single point, you are being judged. People will make remarks about how you were, how friendly you were, whether you fit into the college or not. And so throughout that process, you have to be on your A game, like keeping in mind that, okay, I have to be respectful of everybody. Hopefully you are anyways, but like keeping all those things in mind. We'll talk about more questions later, but I've written some of the questions. For example, for PPE, one of the questions is, I agree that air transport contributes to harmful climate change, but whether or not I make a given plane journey, the plane will fly anyway. So there's no moral reason for me not to travel by plane. Is this a convincing argument? And you can't just say yes or no. You have to give your reasons, and usually they'll try to get more information out of you. It needs to be very well reasoned. They need to see how you're thinking about the certain argument. And for example, in the engineering question as well, they'll see, even if you don't really know the answer, how are you approaching it? What are the concepts that a student at A level and perhaps a bit higher for the Oxford Cambridge interviews would approach this question, even if they don't necessarily know the answer? How are you tackling it? I've had friends who thought that they did terribly in the interview, didn't know the right answer, but they still got in. It's all about the approach. They want to see your aptitude and whether you give up completely or how are you under pressure. Next, please.